Okay, well, hello everybody and welcome to our panel discussion on EV charging infrastructure. My name is Nino Di Cara. I'm president of the news publication Electric Autonomy Canada, and I'm delighted to have been invited by Switch Energy to moderate today's discussion. One of the specific things we'll be talking about today is the government's newly open call for proposals for projects to receive up to 50% funding for the installation of EV charging infrastructure. That funding program is called ZEVIP, and you'll hear us mention that term a few times today. It stands for the Zero-Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Program, ZEVIP. Now, while we don't have any insider knowledge about the way applications are processed, we will be talking to some people who've applied to this program in the past, and they'll be sharing their tips and experience on how to approach the application process. Some quick notes of housekeeping. While the panel discussion is taking place, I invite you to ask questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. You should be able to just see it down there. We're anticipating quite a few questions from the audience, so we will be factoring in time at the end to make sure that we address them. So while we're talking, you can go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A, and it won't disturb, obviously, us speaking in the early stages. This session is being recorded and it will be shared and made available to you after the event. We've got some great panelists today, so let's meet them. First of all, I'd like to introduce you to Cara Clemen, President and CEO at Plug and Drive, which is a non-profit organization committed to accelerating EV adoption and is a trusted and unbiased source of information when it comes to electric vehicles and chargers. Frank Merrill is Vice President of Sparkle Solutions, which has decades of experience providing equipment to apartment buildings and supplies and installs EV chargers without upfront costs to property owners. Rebecca Roy is Executive Director of Luther Village on the Park, a retirement community with more than 450 residents, which applied for EV charging stations in the last ZEVIP round. And Ben Newell, Head of Sales at Switch Energy, sponsors of this event today, which provides electric vehicle charging and energy management solutions for businesses and individuals. So welcome to you all. Thanks for joining us all here today. We're going to start off by inviting Cara to talk a little about electric vehicles, why it's important to take action now on installing EV chargers, and to share some information about the ZEVIP funding program. So Cara, if I can invite you to take the lead.
Thanks so much, Nino, and thanks to you and to Switch for inviting me today. Right now, I can't share my screen because I am disabled, so I'll just wait for you to make that possible. But in the meantime, I do want to talk a little bit about our what Plug and Drive is up to, and I'm going to talk a little bit about trends in the EV sector, and then I'm going to sort of talk about the basics around ZEVIP and try to help people understand what's involved and what kind of projects qualify, and then we'll pass it over to folks who have actually done an application to talk about that. Any luck there, Nino?
Yeah, so I'm just going to reach out to my colleague Charlotte, who's standing by. Charlotte, if you can give Cara presenting permission.
Great. So, I mean, why are we even talking about electric vehicles so much these days? I think, you know, the main reason is, of course, the greenhouse gas emission reductions. And Canada has a really huge advantage, actually, when you take a look at the world, because we have such a low emitting grid. Most provinces in Canada have a low to no emitting grid, and across the country, we actually have as much as 80% of our grid without any greenhouse gas emissions. So that makes Canada a great place to plug in electric vehicles. And I think a lot of people don't realize that transportation is actually in many parts of Canada, the largest emitting sector that we have. In Ontario, it's the largest, and in Canada, it's number 2 across Canada. So I think we're good now. So this is what I was talking about. So transportation is the largest emitting sector in Ontario, and as I said, number 2 across Canada. So we really can't hit our climate goals at all if we don't tackle transportation, and that's the reason that that EVs have sort of come to the front as one of those ready solutions that's sort of available to us now to quickly make reductions to transportation. And as I mentioned, the low emitting grid makes that possible. And here in Ontario, for example, you know, we're plugging into sort of 90+% low to no emitting electricity. And at night, when most of us are going to plug in our cars, it's almost zero. I mean, nothing is zero, but it's extremely, extremely low emitting. And that's the case in many provinces of Canada. If you're in Manitoba, if you're in British Columbia, if you're in Quebec. And so just a huge advantage. And also you're doing your province an economic favor, because plugging into the grid, typically those are local jobs, that's local electricity that you're paying for, whereas most oil and gas revenue leaves the province. So so for many reasons, it's both economically beneficial and good for the environment, which doesn't always line up. So great opportunity. Just 1 minute on Plug and Drive. If you don't know us, we're mostly in the business of public outreach and education. We joke that, you know, our job is to get butts in seats. We try to get people trying those cars, and once they've tried them, we know that that's how to win them over and help them understand those economic and environmental benefits, and decide that their next car will be electric. We also do some policy work, research and other work, but the focus is really outreach and education. If you haven't had a chance to visit us, this is our EV Discovery Center in Toronto. It's the first of its kind in the world, where you could go and test drive all the different makes and models with no pressure to buy anything. Now, we're not open right now. Toronto's under a lockdown, but hopefully in a few weeks, we'll be able to get back at it. And if you haven't had a chance to test drive an EV, I really encourage you to come around and try it. This is just another view. We like to say Science Center meets car showroom. So, but I'm not here to really talk about Plug and Drive and what we're doing. I'm going to talk to you about the excitement in the EV space, the trends, and then talk a bit about ZEVIP and why it's such a great opportunity to get into EV charging and make it more possible for people to make the switch. Pretty great times right now. I've been doing this work for about 10 years, and I have to say, you know, those early years were a little bit of a slog. Now we're in a time where sort of everybody realizes that this is not if anymore, folks. This is just when, and groups like Plug and Drive and Nino's organization and others are just trying to speed it up. We've got more than 7 million vehicles on the roads worldwide. A lot of those are in China. Canada's not doing too bad for a small market. We're at about 10th in the world, but these numbers are growing exponentially, and certainly the outlook is rosy. We're seeing billions being invested worldwide in EVs. Makes and models used to be something we would hear a lot about as a reason why not. It was like they're waiting for a certain brand to come out, or waiting for a pickup truck, or waiting for an SUV. In the next couple of years, all those issues are going away, because there are going to be so many different makes and models available. Within Canada, we have about 40 plus makes and models available today. This time in, let's say the end of 2022, if all the models that have been proposed come to pass, will be over 100 makes and models. So this issue won't be a barrier anymore. And of course, you know, many different predictions out there. I wish I had the crystal ball to know which one was correct, but we're at 7 million-ish worldwide right now. Predictions are around 26 million in 2030. You know, so we're more than, you know, we're doubling annually, basically, global fleet to 116 million vehicles by 2030. You know, that's a huge growth. In Canada, in fact, there's folks estimating that by 2030, almost half the vehicles sold will be electric. So this is a crazy explosion that we're seeing. And I do think it's like important to kind of talk a little bit about COVID and what it's done to the EV trends. At first, it looked like it was having a little bit of a negative impact in the early months a year ago. But now data is sort of showing that it's turned around and rebounding depending on where you live. The challenge we're having in Canada is really supply. It's tough to find the EVs right now. But we know that that issue is short term. We're going to have it. And so this is actually the perfect time to look at building infrastructure just as the vehicles are coming out. One of the positives, I mean, there's been sure plenty of negatives with COVID, but one of the positives is the fact that people are driving less, and it's actually got them thinking more about EVs than they thought before. And the other thing is if you live in a big city like me, you might have woken up one day during the early months of the pandemic and gone, wow, that air quality is really good. I really noticed it, like clean air. And I think a lot of us thought, wow, we could have that all the time. We don't have to wait. If we switch to EVs, we're gonna actually really do ourselves a big health benefit because the air quality is improving. And just finally, a really interesting study that Clean Energy Canada put out. I think Nino Electric Autonomy put out a nice article about this study about some predictions on the amount of EVs we're going to see on the roads in Canada, and the growth in jobs in the EV sector is going to be massive. So just overall very positive, I would say, even though COVID's been tough for many of us, positive in terms of the growth of the EV sector. Just on that health point, if you're interested in learning more about the potential health benefits of EVs, there's a great study, and it's available at clearingtheair.ca. It was done by Ontario Public Health and Environmental Defence, and it really shows the benefit to our health, and that's an aspect of EV that we often don't talk about. We talk about environment and economy, but maybe we don't talk about the health benefit enough. Okay, ZEVIP. I'm going to do the intro, and others are going to fill in the details. Zero-emission vehicle infrastructure program. That's what ZEVIP stands for, by the way. So this is NRCan's funding for EV infrastructure. This has been going on for a few years now, so I think this might be the fourth round of ZEVIP that's been offered. So there are lots of folks who have succeeded, and lots of folks with experience in applying. This particular round, we're seeing that the stated funding is going towards quite a wide range of different types of EV infrastructure installations. So public places, on street, and when they say on street, that's really, it might sound the same as public places, but what that really means is like right on the street where people want to park on the side of the road, as opposed to parking lots. Multi-residential, so that would be both condo and apartment. Workplaces qualify, as well as light duty fleets. So quite a wide range of opportunities there. The application deadline, as stated right now, is June the 22nd. So there's still quite a bit of time to figure this out. The amount of money that they're putting towards this round of funding is $40 million. And NRCan's rules, they've pretty much stayed the same for most of these rounds. They fund 50%. So you got to come up with the other 50%. 50%, and the maximum project cost is $5 million. There are some more detailed requirements, like if you're installing level 2, there have to be at least 20 wands or outlets or ports, whatever you want to call them. If you're doing level 3, the requirements are different. So you want to take a look at the detailed requirements there, but the total project, $5 million. I've included the link here. I'm sure Charlotte or Nino, you're going to include the link to the application process, maybe in the chat or somewhere on the site, but there it is. If it helps you just to read, you got to read the details. This just gives you a high level idea. And just if it's helpful, if you are thinking about workplace charging, just want to point you towards a guide that we put out there. It's generic. It's not, it's more to help. What we found is everyone was asking us the same questions over and over again about workplace charging. Where to put it, should we charge money for it, should we operate it, or should we pay someone to operate it? All these sort of same questions over and over. So we put sort of a generic guide together just to help people, all the steps, the things you need to think about when you're thinking about workplace charging. So if this is helpful to you, please email and you can get a copy of the guide. I'm gonna wind up here and hopefully have time for questions. Plug and Drive is a not-for-profit, and we can't do what we do without our sponsors. So I never like to give a talk without at least a very quick shout out to all our sponsors, including Switch, by the way. We couldn't do what we do without their help. And it's been an especially challenging year with COVID, and we know everyone's under pressure, and we really appreciate the support that companies are showing us to say, yeah, they still think this is a really important thing to get behind. And so thank you very much for that. I'm just so optimistic about our opportunities in the EV space. When you see countries banning gas cars, and you see gas stations making installations, and finally you see the Ontario government announcing support for automakers to switch their factories, manufacturing facilities over to making EVs. That's a huge step for Ontario. Canada's going to be making lots of different EVs, and that's really exciting. So as I said, it's not if, it's when, and we just want that when to be a little bit sooner. And so with that, Nino, I'll hand it back over to you and look forward to hearing people's questions.
Thanks a lot, Cara, and thanks for all the great work that you're doing at Plug and Drive, and doing a phenomenal job of educating and sharing some great information. I think for me, the key point that you in your introduction is that the transition to EVs is when. It's no longer a question of if at all. And so, you know, this is especially relevant for building owners and any what we would call site host organizations are on, you know, who are listening to this discussion today. You know, the government is providing this funding to actually help support you in actually making this transition and actually getting your sites ready to be able to charge vehicles. So let's speak to somebody who's made the decision to install chargers and who applied to the Zevit fund last year. Rebecca, can you tell us a little about Luther Village on the Park and why you wanted EV chargers and why you decided to apply for funding for them?
Sure. So, you know, Luther Village is one of a lot of retirement homes in the region of Waterloo. The unique thing about us is we're a social enterprise, meaning that we generate revenue and we feed it back into a not-for-profit. So we are still considered a nonprofit organization, and unlike people that you might have heard of like Chartwell or Schlegel Villages, we are a single site provider. So we don't have, we're not a rich retirement home, and we don't have the benefit of the economies of scale. So what happened to us was we had a strategic plan for 2017 going to 2020. And as part of that plan, we were really interested. So we have a resident advisory board. Let me back up by saying we're home to about 450 residents. The majority of them, like 3/4 of the resident group, live independently in really lovely townhomes and apartment suites. And then we have 1/4 of our population actually living in a licensed retirement home. But the piece that I'm talking about is more our independent living residents. And we have a resident advisory board. And we try and be collaborative between a leadership team and the resident advisory board. And so many years ago, probably 4 years ago, we started talking about the sustainability of Luther Village on the Park and what would be important from a you know, competitive perspective. As I said, we're only one site, and so how do we remain competitive in in almost a global market. So one of the things we thought was we wanted to get ahead of the game, knowing that in the future, as Kara said, there would be a lot of electric vehicles on the road. And so how do we appeal to that new older adult that may be moving in and may already have an electric vehicle? We don't want that to be a barrier for them to come to Luther Village on the Park. And in the interim, while we're waiting for some of those people to move in, we also have residents right now whose children have electric vehicles, or whose children or guests will in the future have electric vehicles. I kind of joked a little bit earlier when I had said to Nino privately, like, we're trying to get our residents to stop driving. But what we really want, though, is for anybody coming to our site and future residents who will be a little bit younger, we are hoping, to have access to chargers right on site.
Thanks, Rebecca. And how did you hear about the Zevit program, and what kind of led you to making an application last time around?
Sure. So I came in contact with SWTCH several years ago, and was considering exploring the process. We had been doing some research, and at that time we were keen to move forward, but we had to wait because it's, takes some time to generate the funds and put the money aside. And so we had an amount in mind, and we were working towards that. Then the pandemic hit, and we thought, between the need for personal protective equipment and the increased costs surrounding the pandemic in a retirement home environment, and keeping people safe, we thought we're just not going to be able to move forward with this. And we were feeling a little bit heartbroken. But I had stayed in contact with SWTCH over the years, and they were really good in terms of reaching out, and they had let me know, hey, there's this opportunity coming up, and are you interested in taking advantage of a little bit of an incentive? And I said, absolutely, tell me more. And so that's how the process got started. I'm really grateful to SWTCH because without them reaching out to me, I wouldn't have known about the opportunity.
Cool. Thanks, Rebecca. And just a reminder to the audience, if you have questions for Cara or Rebecca, please put them into the Q&A chat on the bottom of your screen there. Now, Frank, your business, Sparkle Solutions, helps property managers, especially apartment buildings, campuses, get EV chargers onto their property without having to pay the upfront costs, which is obviously quite an attractive model. Can you explain how this business model works?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. It's the same business model that we operate 90% of our business. What we do is we operate 1.1 million pieces of self-serve public use equipment across North America. Mostly that is washers and dryers, laundry equipment in multi-residential buildings and also on college and university campuses. That model, what we do is we supply the equipment at no capital cost to the property owner. We install it, we service it, we maintain it. So what we are is we are an outsourced supplier for an offering. Let's take university academics, for example. Universities want to spend their capital and their time on academics, on their sports programs. And not on installing and servicing washers and dryers. So that gets outsourced. That gets outsourced to a company like ours. The same goes for multi-residential apartment building owners. Their core competency is not maintaining equipment. Their core competency is the building itself and the overall creation of a nice living environment for the residents in the building. So again, many of the service offerings for the residents is outsourced to a company whose sole specialty is providing that equipment and that service. So that's what we do. We do it with over 1 million pieces of equipment across North America. We service also major oil companies with car wash equipment. So we're in several different industry sectors. A few years back, some of our larger multi-residential building property management clients and building owners came to us and said, "Wow, you do a great job with the laundry. You guys, you really know what you're doing. You're, as a company, installing and servicing doesn't cost us anything. We know we need to be looking at EV charging for our residents, and we're thinking of a program like you provide us with laundry equipment, the same with EV charging." So at that point, that was about 3 years ago, we started to take a good look and do some research, and here we are. So that's what we're doing. Our piece to the overall EV puzzle, EV infrastructure puzzle, is to supply equipment in to clients, building owner, property managers, who are a little overwhelmed with it. One thing, and two, don't really want to spend the money. So we invest in the equipment. In our program, we have an access fee, a low access fee for anybody who wants to charge. One final thing where we sort of provide a good solution, and that is just take a typical multi-residential apartment building. If I'm a resident and I don't have an EV, I want to make sure a part of my rent, a part of my monthly maintenance is not going to pay for the electricity for somebody to charge their vehicle. You want to get an EV? Fine, I applaud that. But, and the building owners want the integrity to say that to the residents as well, is that there's a program for EV charging, and the people who own and operate and have an EV access that. They pay a small, modest monthly access fee, and then they pay basically the cost of the electricity to charge their car. So, and then the building owner gets reimbursed for the cost of the electricity. So everybody stays whole, and that's, we feel there is a big need for that, and that little niche, that's the niche that we fill. We don't do anything in level 3 charging. We're not playing in that space or in that space. It's strictly level 2 charging, overnight charging, residential charging. And the last note point I'll make is, again, our program is ideal for, I'm going to be in this apartment building for a year, maybe 2 years, but I'm not going to be here long enough to spend $5,000 to put in a level 2 charger with the cost of electricity and everything. So this is great. The building has a program that I can access. As long as I'm here and have an EV, I can charge, just pay my monthly access fee. Same with university. I've got a daughter going to university. She's going with an electric vehicle. We just want her to be able to charge her car overnight when she's in a residence or when she's in classes. So again, access the program, small monthly fee. You get your charge card. Everything's online with Switch, and away you go. So that's what we do. I'll finish, with service. That's really one of our primary core competencies is maintaining public use equipment. Equipment does need to be serviced, though EV is pretty good. There's not a lot of moving parts to it. The connector on the end of the hose is the primary component of maintenance. But there will also be accidental vandalism, cars driving over connectors and hoses, things like that will happen. And that's where we come in. A phone call to our toll-free service line, we're there in an hour, and boom, it's repaired. That's what we bring to the table.
Thanks for explaining that, Frank. And so, Rebecca and Frank, it would be good to ask you both, what was the hardest part of the Zevit application process when you went through it during the last round? And the key thing everybody sure loves to know is, like, how long does this take? Rebecca, perhaps you'd like to kick us off here.
Sure. I feel like that's a trick question because it wasn't hard at all. I'm trying to think back now to when we completed the application, but I worked closely with Laura at Switch to complete the application, and she helped guide us through it a little bit in terms of what kind of information we should be providing. So in terms of what was the hardest part, like, there really wasn't anything hard. It was facilitated for us. Switch made it clear in terms of what kind of information was required. And so it was just a matter of coordinating that information internally with my facility manager, with our finance department, and things like that. But I would say it went very smoothly. And it's a while now, but I don't even think it took an hour. Honestly,
that's quite an endorsement. How about you, Frank? Was it as efficient in your experience?
I would say we're not as good as Rebecca. Rebecca,
yeah, maybe that I'm efficient.
We went at it over a course of a week, not the entire week, but in pieces. 30 minutes here, an hour there, and basically just went through the application. But yeah, it was nothing. It's just straightforward, questions and answering them and going through the process. And for us, it was talking quite a bit about our company and our competency that we bring to the table, which we think is valuable. So yeah, very straightforward. No fine print. No problem at all. We'll say SWTCH is a wonderful partner in that regard. They're in the EV business. That's their core and primary and only business. So they're wonderful, and they're a wonderful group. They are really smart people, and we're happy to partner with them. They are our chosen network management partner, and there's not much about EV charging equipment and/or electric vehicles themselves that they don't know about. So they're a wonderful partner, high integrity, and really smart folks.
Quite the endorsement, and a good time to bring Ben into the conversation. So thanks, Frank, and thanks, Rebecca. So Ben, SWTCH has done a lot of these applications, and it sounds like you're making it very streamlined in supporting clients through the process. Can you speak about how you help property owners, site hosts apply? What does a client need to think about or have ready before they start the application process? Essentially what is required in the process.
Yeah, of course. I'm not sure it's quite as simple as Frank and Rebecca have let it on, or at least our perspective's a little bit more involved, but that's great to hear their experience, that it was that streamlined and that efficient. That's certainly what we hope the experience is. It can be quite intimidating if you're not familiar, depending on your background, what you do professionally. These applications can be pretty intimidating, but I would encourage people to not let that deter them. It's a great program. We're here really to try to create awareness around the program and ensure that people do take advantage of this program. As Kara pointed out, it's funded, I think, until 2014. But with the wave of EVs coming, we expect each year this program to get more competitive to get funds allocated to your project. So we're here sort of saying, hey, if you're thinking about this, get started now. The folks at Enercan have done a great job providing all the relevant details. The website provides a good high-level overview, but it's really the applicant's guide that has the comprehensive details inside. So anyone who's considering an application, I would encourage them to download the applicant's guide from Enercan's website. It's a really simple process. You just fill out the form, and pretty much immediately they send you back that applicant's guide. It, again, can be intimidating. It's over 50 pages, but the first 20 pages really give you the nuts and bolts of the program without getting into too much detail. And so, again, I would strongly encourage anyone who's considering, even if you're going to leverage someone like SWTCH to help you with an application or support you in the process, just make sure you're familiar with the program, because one of the biggest things we get asked is about eligibility. How do we qualify, or are we eligible for a program like this? And so, we really try to break it down into two programs. One is project eligibility. So that's a pretty straightforward one. Is your project in Canada? There's some pretty simple ones there that you need to make sure that you qualify. And then the second one is the technical eligibility. And the big one there is Enercan specifies that they have to be connected chargers. And so that's defined as chargers that are connected to a network and they communicate with each other to provide a dynamic environment. And it also provides reporting. And so those are the two pieces. There's one other piece that Enercan doesn't specify, but I just would sort of bring it up as an education opportunity for the audience, and that is around the open standards equipment. And so whatever provider you talk to, I would encourage you to ask them the question about open standards hardware, and are you truly getting open standards hardware? And there's a great article on electric autonomy, I think just last month or a couple months ago, around the open standards. And then, and last the last part of your question as to what does Switch do? I mean, I think Rebecca and Frank's, you know, experience probably speaks for itself, but we try to break down that intimidation factor. So there's a lot of moving parts to an application. So we try to make sure that we pull all those parts together and nothing gets missed. It's everything from developing a plan, trying to figure out what the needs are of that site today and what their future needs are. Every site is different. Every project is different. Things like site visits, coordination with engineers or electricians, all those things happen in the background, and we take on that burden as your support through the program. And again, I just want to point out that it's a competitive process. This is no rubber stamp or gimme from the federal government. It is competitive. It is merit-based. And so I guess just like if you were applying for a job, I mean, you think about the effort you would put into your resume to try to make sure your resume stands out. I would encourage you to think about your application for ZEVIP in the same approach. Your application needs to stand out, and the devil really is in the details.
Thanks, Ben. A relevant question, actually, just seeing some of the Q&As coming in, is regarding the minimum number and the minimum requirement. So Andrea Sola has asked, I believe the minimum for the ZEVIP is 20 charging stations. Can you elaborate on how you got the matching funding? Because 20 chargers means you need, you know, some funds to get started. So, you know, obviously, you know, as was being referenced, you know, with Frank's example, you know, looking at level 2 chargers is one of the more common types used for residential and workplace chargers. So Ben, you know, what happens if somebody's listening? Obviously, the panelists, as Andrea's asked, and per Rebecca's experience, you know, you only need a smaller amount of chargers. How do you handle that?
Yeah, so great question. Correct. The minimum is 20 level 2 chargers or 2 DC fast chargers if you're looking at DC fast chargers. Many projects don't meet those minimums. And so NRCan allows you to, in fact, in the applicant's guide, they encourage it to compile those into a larger joint application. First, someone needs to lead the application, and that group takes on all the responsibility of you know, the application itself. But you can compile smaller projects together to meet that threshold. And that's what Switch has done for the last number of years. And it's been a great way to get small projects eligibility or access to NRCan funds.
Cool, thanks, Ben. I'm just going to, we've got a bunch of questions which we're going to be going through in a moment, but just before diving into that, Cara, if I can just ask from your advocacy work, you've seen several organizations go through these types of application processes. Can you share some more of the example types of organizations that you've seen actually go through this?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, I was just thinking about that. And in fact, there's quite such a range of types of organizations that have succeeded in ZEVIP. And actually, there is on the website, if you go to, there's a bunch of different headings on that link. And one of them is, you know, successful applicants. And you can see, you know, in past years who's succeeded. And it gives you an idea of the wide range of applicants. So, you know, you see quite a lot of cities and municipalities on there. You see universities on there. And those are usually public charging or on-street charging applications typically. Then you see quite a few electric utilities, and those are sometimes public, sometimes workplace, and then a lot of different private companies. And those can be multi-res, those can be workplace, those can be light-duty fleets, sort of a range again. And you do see a range of sizes of projects, quite a few large projects. And I think, as Ben alluded to, even though they look large, they're multi-site. You know, they've been projects that have been merged together. So, so not to be scared off that you need to have, you know, 40 chargers to be able to apply. Those are usually a whole bunch of folks that got together. And then what I've seen in terms of the successful ones, there is such a range, so you can't really say there's a formula to it, but definitely like multi-use for those charges is helpful. Like in a workplace, like are they available to both fleet and the employees, or are they available to the employees and to the public and to visitors? Like to be able to offer more than one type of solution, I think is a good strategy. And also sometimes to partner because, you know, like if you were giving a grant, you like to see groups coming together and partnerships and something that seems a little bit innovative, a little bit different. I think usually those are more likely to, especially as Ben said, as it gets more competitive. I think, you know, sort of a little bit of innovation of the kind of partners that come together is helpful.
Thanks, Corey. A very relevant question from Tim Kitchen. Would you see this as an option for our school? We would like to provide an option for members of our community to access our parking lot and charge their cars when school is not happening.
My gosh, I think that is such a fantastic idea. I've been saying this in neighborhoods, like in big cities where where there's a struggle for street parking and there's permit parking. You know, a local school, a local library could really be the charging location for those people. Or if, let's say, there's a condo where, for whatever reason, let's say it's cost prohibitive, or an apartment building where it's just not feasible, maybe. You know, a nearby school could really be a solution. So I do think that's something. It certainly would, as far as I know, Ben would know better. It would qualify. It's just a matter of putting the right application together.
Yeah, we've worked with a number of school boards, Nino, and have put chargers into their locations. And so, yeah, it's probably not the most popular, but it's gaining popularity.
Cool. Question from Colin Lindsay. Am I correct in thinking that the program requires inclusion of actual charging stations, 20 minimum, and that building basic infrastructure to allow connections won't apply?
So the funding's for total project cost, not just for the chargers. They do put a cap on it. It's $5,000 per charger, but that's just a cap. It's not limited to charger expense only. So it is the total project cost. So it can include more than just the charger. The infrastructure to support it as well is eligible.
Thanks. A question from Adrian Pettifer. What is required to identify costs pertaining to the installation portion of the chargers?
As part of our application, we include estimates from certified electricians is the probably the most popular, most dominant way that we would information we would supply.
Cool.
Sorry, Nino, I'll just add, Ben, you know, Switch ourselves, we have electrical contractors that we use right across Canada, and certainly in Ontario, but across Canada, and they're more than willing to come and give you a very accurate quote, and in hopes that they're going to get the business. So that is, but that's definitely what you want to do. You don't want a homebody or a backyard do it yourself for doing that. You want a certified electrical contractor. They'll come in. Switch has a list right across Canada. Give you that quote. They're happy to do that. And now you have now you know your cost for infrastructure, electric infrastructure to the what we call point of installation. This is where I want to install the EV. Most of them can also advise you. You know what's a better spot over here? We have to run less conduit. It's closer to the electric room where the electric panels are. And if you can free up these 2 spots here, this is really where you want to put them. So you'll have some banter back and forth like that. But you definitely want to do that properly, and they'll come and do it for you, and right to the dollar, a quote.
Frank, while we're with you, we've got a question from Ken Connors, who's asking, does your program supply and service public use chargers only, or do you supply and service to private parking spots in condos?
Yeah, we're open to anything that would host a level 2 charger. So what we would do is meet with the location, the management owner, and go from there. You know, present and discuss back and forth, have dialogue with what they're thinking, and what our offering, can we fit the bill here, and then we go from there. So anywhere, even office building, same thing. You know, I'm employed here. I don't know how long I'm going to be working in this office building. I just need to charge my EV. So it's a site by site, project by project discussion, and then you go from there.
Got a question from Dan Nolan. Can funding support from this NRCan program be stacked with funding that may be available from BC Ready EV?
Yeah, again, I would defer you to there's language in the applicant's guide. I believe it's capped at up to 75%, but please check the applicant guide. It's spelled out there, and there's a specific section around stacking the funding with the provincial levels or the provincial available funding.
Okay. And anonymous question, two questions. Is the initial load assessment free of cost? And if a Merb was not granted the 50% rebate, can it stop proceeding with the project and any costs incurred?
So load assessment, again, depends on the partner, but yeah, load assessment is typically done. A lot of groups, a lot of buildings are taking a more proactive approach, and so they're coming up with an EV strategy. You see this is popular in British Columbia, where they're not just looking at their needs of today, they're trying to say, okay, what would it take to get to 100% electrification of our parking garage? And so that's probably a much bigger project and much bigger scope, but they want to understand what the end game is. And then they can look at a phased approach into it. And so you see provincial government of BC had funding for EV ready programs. And so we see a lot of groups that are taking that step to make sure that they have a holistic building approach. And then they're just looking at a phased approach. And so that holistic approach would include the load assessment and then that future demand that they need to provision for or understand. And yes, if you don't get funding, you don't have to proceed.
Cool, thank you. Question from Sophia K. Amin. How do you, and Rebecca, this might be one that you would have considered in your process. How do you get a car out to allow another car in? Say a resident gets home at 6 and leaves the car and then goes to bed and wants to pick it back up again in the morning. It doesn't allow anyone else to use the charger. How do you avoid that?
It's a great question. And I should say in our community, residents police everything themselves. They take care of making sure people are following all the rules. So it wouldn't be something that we need to worry about. But what I would say is our plan is to ensure that we have dedicated spots that are, signed, and really it will be up to the, and it'll be in a common area. So the idea is the person that's there charging will be visible, but that's not something that, again, we're talking about not the retirement home component. We're talking about like a condo development. And so, as I said, we've got dedicated spots that are clearly marked, and so that would be managed among the resident group.
And I can add real quickly, we're learning as we go as well. Ben, you can probably chime in a little bit. Good news is that folks that drive EVs are so far very respectful people and very intelligent people, and respect their time and other people's time. So we're seeing of course, the Switch app sends a signal to the charge or recipient via text, email, that the car is now fully charged. And one way what we're doing is that customer, that user has 30 minutes to come down and move their car. If they don't come down and move their car, then they're giving a small penalty. And I don't know how many, very few penalties we've given so far. So again, this is a learning process. And the other thing that we're going to be doing in the new big project we hope to be going forward with is that at some point we're thinking 10 p.m. If you just begin your overnight charging at 10 p.m., you're good till the next morning till 7. There has to be some sort of, we can't have people coming down at 3 o'clock in the morning because they have to move their car. So, you know, there's going to be some give and take there. And that's called being an entrepreneur. That's called being proactive. That's called figuring it out and making it happen. So I don't think anybody has all the answers to that yet, but we're working on through our program and with Switch, and there'll be nuances like that. And we think we can make it work.
And just to add to that, we focus a lot, or we do a lot of work in multi-unit residential deployments. And so we've got a feature set that supports that. It's features that you can turn off and on depending on the site. Every site's different. Again, Frank pointed out that there is a very respectful culture between EV drivers in terms of that, you know, monopolizing chargers. But in some cases, some sites, you do see that. And so there's anti-loitering functionality built in. And so like Frank said, it can be something as simple as just a friendly reminder. You can escalate it so it becomes a bit more punitive. They get charged fees if they stay too long. And then on the other side of it, there's also the ability to schedule. So you can schedule a session. So, you know, if you've got that road trip on the weekend, you can schedule your charging Thursday night. So you get that last session Thursday night and you get to charge, you know, all day, and you pick your car up Friday and you're ready to go.
A question from Nicole Lafontaine. Is required electrical infrastructure to support level 2 charging included?
Is that to Frank?
We kind of answered that a short while ago, but you go ahead. You go ahead with that.
It's included in the Zevit program, so that's I feel like we've answered it for the Zevit program. So I was curious, maybe that was with regards to Frank, your program.
Okay, yeah. So we are investing capital. So if the Zevit program is providing 50% of the cost, yeah, our company Sparkle. If we approve the project and approve the client, we are paying the other capital. So yeah, we are making a large investment in capital here, and we're looking for that client that's either can't or doesn't have the capital, or doesn't want to put capital into this area and wants to use it elsewhere. That's where we come in. We've got the money, but we have to approve that and so on. And that's maybe the benefit of our program, is that it's turnkey. We do everything. You have no cost, or the building owner, property owner, management has no cost. So yes, we make up the difference, but we of course have to approve that and yes.
Good. A question from Volker Beckman, and it's just popped out of my feed. Are any of your services available in Manitoba, Ben?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we're North American based, so absolutely. Yeah, we do work from coast to coast and both north and south of the border. And Frank's on mute, but
yeah. So we service from St. John's, Newfoundland, to Corner Brook, to Prince Rupert, BC, to Whitehorse. We are in every inch of Canada. We service all First Nations, and we are, and that actually is from North America, but we're just talking about Canada. So, yeah.
Cool. A question from Sophia K. Amin. Again, another good question that I'm sure many will relate to. We have a building that has Wi-Fi connection issues. Is there a different way to deal with chargers in this building? As you said, chargers, for Ben, as you said, chargers obviously communicate with each other.
Yeah, it requires a site assessment to come understand if there's something unique about your site. But Switch, I mean, we typically put in our dedicated Wi-Fi network to our chargers, or cellular, depending what's available, or what gets the best reception. And so that's part of our site assessment, is we actually we measure signals and we come up with a comprehensive plan for the connectivity. It's imperative for the chargers to be well connected to operate. And that's why we take it on as part of our obligation to put that system in place, and we don't rely on residential Wi-Fi.
A question of the differences between level 2 and level 3 chargers. Who needs level 2 versus who needs level 3?
Kara, do you want to take that one? Yeah, sure. Yeah. Go ahead, Kara.
Okay, sure. So typically level 3 is really for the road trip. It's going to be at highway rest stops for the longer drives. It's going to be or near highways, maybe at major intersections, maybe at a mall. But for the most part, it's for long drives. Level 2 is perfect for anybody who's charging overnight, anybody who's staying more than an hour or two somewhere. So that's everything from multi-unit to workplace to even like go type parking lots to malls or restaurants. Those all tend to go to level 2. And of course, level 2 are a lot less expensive to install. And level 3 really doesn't make sense in, let's say, a multi-use residential setting. It's not really necessary in my view, Ben. I don't know if you have a different view, but to me, that's a waste of money when level 2 really works perfectly well.
Totally agree.
Great. Well, we're coming up to time, and there's still many questions that unfortunately we haven't been able to get to. But I know the team at Switch will endeavour to answer the questions that we haven't got to live subsequently. Before wrapping up, I'll just invite, if there's any panelists or who'd like to add any other comments regarding the application process that we haven't covered off already, please feel free to do so.
I was just going to point out that the deadline is June 22nd, as Kara shared up at the beginning. Despite what Rebecca and Frank is, it's not just a couple hours work. It's not something you kind of do the day before the due date. There are a lot of pieces and parts, and again, it involves electricians, engineers, site visits, all these things. And so I would, if anyone's thinking to apply, I would think about giving yourself almost a month to put together all these pieces. That's sort of our internal deadline. We've given ourselves an internal deadline of June 1st, even though the actual deadline is June 22nd. We don't want to start any new applications after June 1st for just fear of being too tight on timelines to put together a really comprehensive application. And so when you think about it in those terms, it's less than 60 days away. And so if you are thinking about this, and I would encourage you to take advantage of this opportunity and reach out to connect, whether it's with Enercan directly or whether it's with a group like Switch.
Great. So time is of the essence, and if you're interested, make those outreaches right now.
Yep.
Great. Well, thank you, Ben, and thank you to all our panelists for sharing your expertise, and to everyone in the audience for attending and for really giving us so many great questions to answer. A special thank you to Switch Energy for presenting this webinar. We will be sharing a link to a recording of this in the next few days to anyone who is registered. So please look out for that. Thank you all very much, and have a good rest of the day.